Good morning. I'm Barry Bryson, and I thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're coming down to the last chapter of the book of Amos as part of our larger study of the minor prophets, and we're going to look at chapter 9, verses 1 through 10. This is really the conclusion of the prophecy, chapter 9. We finished the visions, the 5 visions of God's judgment, which comprise the last large section of the book. We end with 2 sections, one which describes the destruction of the sanctuary, and it's severe. And then we end in a note of hope, verses 11 through 15, the promise of the Messiah and the eternal kingdom and the blessings of God in the eternal kingdom. I have to admit, Amos is a hard book. It really is a hard book to read. It's a hard book to read because it hits home for us, because the sins are not the worship of Baal, but the worship of money. It's hard to read because we know how well deserved it is. And even though God relents on the fiercest judgment that he should bring, and even though he bears his broken heart to us, the images are so vivid. They just cut right to the bone. We know exactly what God is describing. And the language continues to be so vivid in chapter 9, verses 1 through 10, when he talks about the destruction of the sanctuary and the final destruction of the nation of Israel. I saw the Lord standing beside the altar, and he said, "Smite the capitals, so that the thresholds will shake, and break them on the heads of them all. And I will slay the rest of them with the sword. They will not have a fugitive who will flee, or a refugee who will escape. Though they dig into the grave, into Sheol, into hell, from there my hand shall take them. And though they ascend to heaven, from there I will bring them down. Though they hide on the summit of Carmel, I will search them out and take them from there. And though they conceal themselves from my sight on the floor of the sea, from there I will command the serpent, and it will bite them. And though they go into captivity before their enemies, from there I will command the sword that it slay them. And I will set my eyes against them for evil and not for good. And the Lord God of hosts, the one who touches the land so that it melts, and all those who dwell in it mourn, and all that rises up like the Nile, and subsides like the Nile of Egypt, one who builds his upper chambers in heaven, and has founded his vaulted dome over the earth, he who calls for the waters of the sea, and pours them out on the face of the earth, the Lord is his name. Are you not as the sons of Ethiopia to me, O sons of Israel, declares the Lord? Have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Arameans from Kir? And behold, the eyes of the Lord are on the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from the face of the earth. Nevertheless, I will not totally destroy the house of Jacob, declares the Lord. For behold, I am coming. I will shake the house of Israel among all nations, as grain is shaken in a sieve, and not one kernel falls to the ground. And all the sinners of my people will die by the sword, those who say the calamity will not overtake or confront us." Okay, this is severe, and it's absolute. He says, if you refuse to admit that this is going to happen, there's no hope for you. If you dig a hole to hell, or you climb up to heaven, I'll find you and I'll take you there. If you think you can hide yourself in the blinding snows on top of Mount Carmel, or hide yourself in the darkness of the depth of the sea, I'll take you there and find you there. And even when I take you to captivity, your punishment is not going to be over. Now, God has mentioned earlier in the prophecy a couple of times that he's going to relent and not bring them the tough punishment they deserve. But their punishment was tough enough. The Assyrians were a violent, barbaric, awful people. They were not the Babylonians. They did not let these communities stay intact. They scattered them to the four winds. And they exposed them to the worst kinds of murder and torture on the way into captivity. They were a violent, awful people, and their armies were, and the punishment that they brought to bear against the northern kingdom, as bad as the judgment was on the southern kingdom, was not even to be compared. And yet he says, I'm not going to absolutely destroy. There's going to be a bit of a remnant. The key is this. You have to admit that this is going to happen and seek the Lord while he may be found. But if you continue to sin and say this isn't going to happen, you're going to die by the sword. Okay. Well, thankfully, we end on a word of hope and on a vision looking forward into the future of the coming Messiah and God's eternal kingdom. And that's how we'll end the book of Amos when we're together next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.